This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This week I'm back with another video on a subjective topic, one that is completely based on my own opinion, and not objectively based on the way that cards have performed in Magic's history. This time, I'm looking at flavor fails. Now, I want to say up front, I am most certainly not a Vorthos, and my definition of flavor fail may be different than your own. I don't follow Magic's story closely, and for that reason, these aren't cards that don't make sense in the context of Magic's story. Instead, they're cards that are flavor fails because they do something that is counterintuitive for whatever is featured in the card's name or card's art. So, the 10 cards on this list are my picks for the biggest flavor fails in all of Magic. Let's get started. At number 10, I have a card that, in addition to doing something that doesn't make much sense, just doesn't feel like it should be the card type it is. And that's the Brute. Brute is obviously a noun, and it's even a specific noun because of the article adjective the. So this card sounds like it should be a creature card. The enchantment form of this would be called Brutality or something like that, right? On top of that, though, a Brute, by definition, is a big, dumb, strong guy, and the flavor text and art of this card support that. So does what this card does make sense for that? Not at all. It gives only a small power boost, and it gives the creature the ability to regenerate, neither of which sounds particularly brutish. At number 9, I have a card whose art doesn't fit the card at all, and that's Bloodsoaked Champion. From the look of the card, it looks like this guy should not only have high toughness, but he should also most certainly be able to block. He has 2 shields. Sure, those shields look pointy, like they can be used defensively, but the idea that he has not 1, but 2 shields and can't block is a pretty huge flavor fail for me. At number 8, I have Lambhold, Pacifist. Overall, werewolves are a huge flavor win, and the double face mechanic is probably one of the most flavorful mechanics Wizards has ever designed. However, this particular card bothers me when it comes to flavor. It was a great card in its limited format, so I played it a lot, and the more I did, I felt like it needed a name change. Sure, it can't attack without some help or transforming. I guess that's where the pacifist part comes from. However, the fact that it is a 3/3 and could block and kill creatures in combat surprisingly well doesn't feel like what a pacifist should be doing. On top of that, if you could just pump her up to a 4/4, not an impossible task in the format, she just sort of stops being a pacifist at all and can just beat down your opponent. The same is true if she has a friend who is 4/4 or larger. So if she has a strong friend, she stops being a pacifist altogether. She really needs to have some stronger convictions than that. The idea that when she transforms, she isn't a pacifist anymore is a cool idea, but the fact that she stops being one without transforming is not, and really sort of devalues the flavor of the card in general. Either the name of this card should have been changed, or it should have been designed differently to really feel like a pacifist before it transforms. So at number 7, I have Whelming Wave. This card, at first glance, seems really flavorful, right? It bounces a lot of creatures, but not the water-based ones. But there are a lot of water-based creatures it can bounce, and you might be saying, well, maybe if those are the only water-based creature types in Born of the Gods, it makes sense for that particular plane, and it makes sense flavor-wise, but you'd be wrong. Born of the Gods has several merfolk who should be unaffected by this. Probably the biggest flavor fail to bounce of all is Master of Waves, who's clearly not a Master of Waves since it can be bounced by this. One could also make an argument that Sirens, who are sort of aquatic, should be immune too, but mostly it's the merfolk problem. Then if you play this outside of Theros block, it makes even less sense that it bounces fish, frogs, hippogriffs, jellyfish, leviathans, whales, at least some turtles, starfish, sponges, squids, and oysters, among other things. And yeah, I get that putting all those creature types on this card would be kind of crazy, but that doesn't mean I'm not bothered by the fact that this wave is so useful against most aquatic creatures. At number 6, I have a pretty simple card. Gaia's Skyfolk, who's just a 2-mana 2/2 with flying. How can something with that little text really be a flavor fail? Well, maybe because this is a creature who is an elf merfolk, and why would an elf merfolk be able to fly? Know how many merfolk there are in the game that can fly? About 20, and the vast majority of those ride on other creatures that give them the ability to fly. They can't fly on their own. Know how many elves have flying? 3, counting Gaia's Skyfolk, and they also both have mounts that enable them to fly. So why does combining these two pretty much flightless creature types make a flyer? It just bothers me. At number 5, I have Pinned to the Earth, another fairly simple card that manages to be a flavor fail despite a tiny text box. The thing that is annoying about this is that despite its name, and the art, Pinned to the Earth does not take away flying from creatures, and it obviously should. This one really seems like Wizards was even aware of how much of a flavor fail this card was, because when they later printed the very similar Tightening Coils, they made sure it took away flying. At number 4, I have Arixmathes, a card that is pretty cool flavor-wise in a lot of ways. I mean, it is a sleeping island, and if enough stuff happens, it becomes a giant creature that can wake up and really torment your opponent. So what bothers me about it? Well, the fact that despite counting as a land, it doesn't count as an island. I mean, flavor-wise, it is literally an island until it wakes up, right? It is a slumbering isle. So why is it just a regular old land? I know, it is a blue-green card, so maybe it should be a forest island. I mean, from the art, that would also make sense. Sure, the card would function differently, since it can add both blue and green mana as a land, something a regular old forest island can't do. But I think sacrificing a bit of power so that this card makes more sense probably would have been worth it. At number 3, we have King Makar, the Gold Cursed. Like a lot of things in Theros, King Makar is a reference to Greek mythology, specifically the story of King Midas. Midas made a wish to the god Dionysus that everything he could touch would turn to gold, but like a lot of wish stories, it has a be careful what you wish for moral, because everything the guy touches turns into gold, including his daughter in some versions of the story. So yeah, Makar here is plagued by a similar curse, and it is cool they found a way to represent it flavor-wise, right? Kind of. The idea that he turns creatures into literal gold is cool, but you know what doesn't make sense? The fact that despite this character being cursed, his untap effect is a May effect, and it really shouldn't be. The guy is cursed. Anything he comes into contact becomes gold. He doesn't have a choice. If the only creature on the battlefield is yours, you should have to exile it and turn it into gold. I get it. Wizards likes to avoid feel-bad moments like that for new players, but this is a rare, so I think it would have been worth it flavor-wise. On top of that, if his touch is enough to turn something into gold, well, why doesn't he turn things he does combat damage to into gold? Yeah, overall, I think they kind of failed on the execution of making this story feel like it's represented in this card effectively. At number 2, I have the card that initially inspired me to make this list, Gatebreaker Ram. So, obviously, this card is awesome in Ravnica Allegiance Limited, and if you've watched me stream or my draft videos of that format, you have probably already heard why it is this card bothers me. Based on the art and name of the creature, it likes to destroy gates, right? Well, not only does the Ram not destroy gates, he seems to actively love them if his owner has a bunch of them. Why does he like gates? I've heard the idea that having gates around gets him riled up, and I could maybe go with that if he also broke gates, but he doesn't do that. A name like this seems like it should be a creature who destroys gates one way or another, maybe sacrifices gates you control to get bigger, and it really needed a name change before the card was printed. And at number 1, I have the entire cycle of lands that Valakut the Molten Pinnacle is a part of. Every time I see one of these, they annoy me. Why? Not really because of anything they do in their text box. It's because of what they don't have written on the card. Despite having the typical naming convention of legendary permanents and having what are clearly references to unique things, I mean, there isn't more than one Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, right? That sounds pretty specific, but they aren't legendary. I think maybe they did this for power level reasons. They wanted to push these cards to be better and constructed, and obviously that worked. If you could only have one Valakut in play at a time, for example, Scapeshift decks would be a lot less good. But the names of these should have been changed if they wanted to make them not legendary. I mean, these are the names. In addition to the most well-known one, Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, we also have Emiria, the Sky Ruin, Magosi, the Water Veil, Crypt of Agadim, and Oran Reef, the Vastwood. Those names sound legendary. They are all specific places. It's not just any old land that you can find all over the place. So if they did decide to make these lands not legendary on purpose, they definitely should have changed the names. Well, that does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to watch even more MTG Top 10s, I've done over 160 of them. You should see the playlist for them on your screen now. Thanks for watching.